Yes. Cool. It started recording. Hi, everyone. I'm Fadi. I'm one of the co-organizers here as well. I just finished my internship at Microsoft as a PM intern, and previously I was involved in a startup also in reforestation and deforestation. Can you hear me though, Iris?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Amazing. Yeah, and I'd love for Alexis to kind of introduce yourself briefly to the audience, so they could learn a little bit more about you before we start the interview.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Alexis Plair. I am currently a product manager at Tesla in the energy group, and have spent most of my career since school in product management. And I graduated in 2014, so it's like 7 years ago now. Yeah, I live out in Oakland, in the Bay Area. I love it here. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about my past experiences prior to Tesla in the conversation, but excited to be here and be talking to everyone. Definitely love product management, so always welcome a chance to talk more about it and meet more folks who are interested in it as well.
Amazing. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you, Iris. Sorry, Alexis. So if you could just, start the conversation. When did you start taking an interest in climate change? How did this all start for you?
Yeah, I think, the first point in my life where I remember it becoming more of a top of mind interest was probably in college. So I grew up in like North Georgia. So as opposed to like folks who might have grown up in California or even New York or places where talking about climate, et cetera, is more common and widespread. It wasn't necessarily a top of mind thing for me as a young person, but in college I had an amazing opportunity to take a study abroad trip to Costa Rica, and at the time I was just looking for a program that seemed interesting to me. So, but this particular one was focused on, there was a Spanish language component, and then the rest was on like climate change and social justice. And little did I know that was like, that intersection is where I was going to be spending like the rest of my life. But yeah, and I got to see Costa Rica in general is a country that does things very differently as it pertains to the climate. They consider their climate to be like very central and core to the country, and what makes it great. And I also, one of the professors there was just super knowledgeable about climate and kind of opened my mind to things in ways that it hadn't been opened before, just education that I hadn't had before. So yeah, really after that door was opened, I think, once you start to process the gravity of climate change, it changes you for sure. So that's when the interest probably started. And then, the more I learned, the more that interest in it grew over time.
Wow, that's amazing. So, but at the same time, though, you were studying communications, right? How did that help you get into the PM career? Because, at the one hand, you were studying communications and you went on the study abroad, but then the result was you entered a very arguably a technical role as a PM.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was a communications major in school. I had an advertising focus, and particularly on the strategy research side of advertising. So less of the like creative design and work that goes into creating an advertising campaign, a physical advertising campaign, and more of the who are the people we're trying to reach, and what makes them tick, and what's the competitive landscape look like, and what is this company's brand within that, and what are they looking to do right now, and how do we speak to the people we're trying to speak to in a way that's resonating. And so I loved that work. I had a second major also in psychology, so as I've reflected on this over my life, I realize the common thread and the things that interest me are just being able to understand people and how they work, and how they think and how they do what they do, and then use that understanding of people to solve problems. So I think that's exactly what I was doing in the advertising work that excited me most. It just, the solution I was building was like a campaign to, help with branding or help with selling a certain product. But in product management, the solution you build around that understanding and the solutions you build to problems are actual products and features and things that the customers will interact with. So all of that is to say, I coming out of school thought I wanted to go into corporate marketing. And so that's what caused me to seek out or be interested in. There was a rotational program at IBM that I became aware of, and that seemed exciting to me because I got a chance to, my thought was, I'll go into this program, I'll do a couple of rotations, that'll be great experience for me, and then, find my home in corporate marketing and stay there and be happy. And then I tried product and I was like, whoa, this is another level. Like, I love this. And particularly in corporate marketing, there are some organizations where the marketing is less of that strategy work and more on the execution and like project management side. So for me, I actually found the product work to be all of the things that I liked, but then you actually got to like build something, especially in the case of technology and software, and then try it out and see it in the wild and like continue to iterate on it. And I, haven't left product since. So yeah, I think like a lot of the research and strategy and thinking about people that I learned about in school definitely is a similar thread of how my particular like product strength and style is now. So, I have worked on very like complex tech products, but I don't consider myself a technical person. I just consider myself a strong communicator and a good problem solver. So whereas other PMs might come into this path from a more technical place, I definitely came in from the more human-centered, user-oriented, customer-oriented side of the house for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think people have this myth that PMs always have to come from a CS background. That is totally not true. I'm also not from a totally CS background, so definitely resonate with that. So next question, since you mentioned you started this rotational program at IBM and that was your first job out of school, that's really exciting. So what did you do as an APM at IBM?
Yeah, so the program I was in at IBM was in the Watson group, which is the group within IBM that focuses on their artificial intelligence technologies. At the time I was there, it was really broken down into a few categories. So there were speech analytics, so basically like understanding what people are saying, image analytics, so understanding objects and figures in images, and then there was text analytics. And within text analytics, there was a segment of that was understanding emotion and sentiment in text. So I know a lot of people in the tech space might be familiar with sentiment analysis, which can tell you if a sentence is positive or negative. Folks might use that for listening to customers on social media. They might use it for customer service to determine when to escalate or when to route customers from automated chats to people, that sort of thing. And then at IBM, there's another level of that, which is sussing out tone or emotion. So instead of just positive, negative, it's like, oh, is this a sad negative or is this an angry negative? Is this a disappointed tone or is this an excited tone? And added another level of nuance to that. So that was one segment of the greater text analytics portfolio. So I focused specifically on that. And through my time there, I also worked a short period of time on a language translation product or service. The actual products that I was working on were APIs, so basically tools that developers and other companies used to put those technologies into their systems. So a much different space than I'm in today, a very interesting space. Yeah, the types of things and use cases and demos that happened at IBM Watson were really cool. And just as a person interested in technology, it was really awesome stuff. So yeah, that's what I worked on at IBM.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. I feel like whatever that's related to like human psychology, emotion, is just really cool. So what were some of your biggest learning when you were working at IBM?
Yeah, I think, you know, just in general in my first job, just like what it means to work, like what it means to have a manager and have that relationship and have ownership of something and have objectives and goals that you're tracked on and that sort of thing. So I think that was step one. And it's a bit different from school or projects or even internships and things I had done before. Second, I think the biggest thing I took away from IBM was like how to be effective in a space that I, before trying out, had like no experience or understanding of or expertise in. So, you know, artificial intelligence or text analytics or any of the things I was just talking about were totally new to me at the time that I joined. And, you know, while we did have lots of attention and time to help us onboard to Watson in general in this rotational program, there was also a lot of like specific things, even just in like the space that I was working in, on like understanding like developers and enterprise companies and how they think about products versus like a consumer product, understanding like how much like data and training matters in an artificial intelligence product, how to like work with engineers who are like renowned in this space, and I'm like, you know, a brand new APM. Some of those things were learnings that I took of just how to kind of face a space that you know nothing about, that you need to know more about to be effective, and you know, take the steps, use people, use resources, etc., to get the information you need to do work well, and to solve problems well, which is the ultimate goal. And that's definitely something that I took with me in every role or every experience since then.
Yeah, and so speaking of which, it sounds like your time at IBM was like a really good training grounds to the space and introduction ground. So how, like, and then like you, a little after a bit of time, you joined Sunrun. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit more about what Sunrun is and how did you decide to, you know, when it was time to join Sunrun?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sunrun is a residential solar provider. They're the leading residential solar provider currently. And they basically are known for a few financial products that enable folks to install solar panels and batteries on their homes, on their any like residential single family home really. And I believe they do a little bit of multifamily as well. And yeah, so Sunrun is organized by financial product, as I mentioned. So they are most known for their lease option. So it's an option where with zero down and with Sunrun technically owning the system, a customer can just pay a monthly price for solar, and basically if they're in a scenario where they're saving, instantly save. So there's no like loss of money up front, and also get the benefits of clean energy, potentially a battery to power through outages, etc. And then they also have a loan option, and of course customers can purchase the system outright. So yeah, and then so that's what Sunrun is. They're a financer of solar, an installer of solar, and they also service the solar as well. And then how did I, kind of decide to make the switch? Yeah, even upon joining IBM, I had that interest in climate start to grow. And as I was working through my time there. I was definitely enjoying learning about product and enjoying product generally. But even upon joining IBM, one of the reasons I was thinking that would be a good fit for me was, IBM does so much. There has to be a way to work on something in the energy space and potentially the smart city space, which they're involved in, and kind of move towards that direction where I want to be. But sometimes those types of internal moves are less accessible than you might think. For example, some teams might be mostly consultants and they don't really have product roles and on that side of the business or something like that. So that's what kind of caused me to start to look elsewhere, as I was really ready to work on something that left me more fulfillment impact perspective. So, the job I was working is absolutely a job many people would be extremely excited about and passionate about, but the end result that we were working towards wasn't something that personally motivated me. And I was learning that was pretty important for me to work through a job. So yeah, I was really seeking a place in the energy space, and I was particularly curious about clean energy because there's a lot you can do within the climate space outside of energy. But I was particularly thinking about clean energy as a place where technology has a significant role, but also, building great customer experiences to make clean energy options more appealing than the alternative. I thought that was a place where my particular skill set and my desire for impact met in a really nice way. So yeah, I started looking for things in the clean energy space, and Sunrun just had great conversations with them, and ended up being that next step for me.
That's amazing, and I think that I'm personally starting to see that too, where personal fulfillment is really important as part of the job. So just as a reminder, Sunrun is a residential solar provider, which is known for its financial products. So what part of the business were you involved in as a PM at Sunrun then?
Yeah, so Sunrun was a unique product experience in that I think with traditional product manager, you own some technology product and you have a team of developers that you work with and, use agile product development to iterate on a technology product. At Sunrun, yeah, the customer facing product was really the technology product. So there is a software product team at Sunrun, but they mostly build the internal tools that teams use. So I was on the customer products team, but that meant we were organized by financial product instead of hardware even. And that evolved over time as the team grew and folks took up there was a hardware PM and is now. But yeah, so at the time I joined, I was focused on the customer-owned products as compared to the Sunrun-owned lease. The customer-owned products were the loan offering and the cash purchase. So for the loan, a lot of that work was ensuring we had a competitive loan offering and great customer experience. And a lot of that was done through loan partners because Sunrun doesn't actually service the loans themselves. They use partners for that. And then on the cash side, there were also, because service didn't come by default for the purchase option, there were also elements of, customers basically purchasing a service package with the cash offering. And that was the main feature I interacted with there, but also just understanding the customers for each, as they're a bit different for each of those financial products, and ensuring even the way our sales folks talk to customers in person, because the sales process for Sunrun while I was there was very much a salesperson going to a customer's home, talking through this process, technicians going to the customer's home, inspecting it, installing the system. There was, less of a digital interaction throughout that process. It was very much high touch, in-person interactions through the sales process. So yeah, but making sure that customer experience is great was another part of that, or another aspect of that role.
And I know there's a couple of people here who mentioned they're either working in the energy space or have an interest in it. I'm sure they're interested in asking this question too. What were your biggest challenges, working in this customer experience role as part of a residential solar company?
Yeah. Yeah, I think challenges at Sunrun were kind of similar to some of the things I mentioned at IBM, just coming up to speed in another new, pretty nuanced space. So they're just understanding the like details of the financing were pretty crucial to how Sunrun thinks about product. So that was a new type of work for me, or even just type of knowledge for me to build. Understanding like the policy landscape, hyper localized like pricing and product offerings was something new to me at Sunrun for sure. In that every solar market, there are different utilities that basically are their alternative to the solar offering. And there are different incentives. So the way that the pricing comes together, and therefore the way that you think about the value for the customer, is unique in just about every area that a solar company sells in. So that just coming up to speed on all of those things, and then being able to manage those things in various projects was probably the biggest challenge there. Yeah, I think I would say that's the biggest challenge. That was the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's like you're more focused on the finance side instead of the actual climate. So yeah. So I'm curious, as you've been transitioning your career a lot, and you've definitely had an amazing journey until now that you're working at Tesla, I wonder, about your career, how do you decide when to move on to the next opportunity?
Yeah, and I was doing some reflecting on this earlier this week, and yeah, I think there are a few things. So one is just like a kind of a feeling that happens sometimes. So I'll call this category like the actual job and work that you're doing. Is that keeping you excited? Is that keeping you challenged? And that is one aspect that for me, if that starts to change, that's usually when I start to think about some type of shift, whether it's just how do I expand my scope, or does it make sense to think about a new company? Thinking about the company itself, do you believe in the goals and the objectives they have for themselves? Do you believe that they have the right strategy to get there? And part of the reason these things matter for me are A, like you want to be at a place that's doing well, but B, as an impact-oriented person, how much impact the company is having really matters. So, being on board with the company strategy and the things that they're doing is definitely one thing I'm thinking about. Then just the people, like, do you enjoy working with the people that you work with? And that might have been the case at one point, but people and companies change and move around. So do you enjoy your manager? Do you enjoy your coworkers? Like day to day, enjoying the people you're around is probably, at least for me personally, the thing that most impacts my day-to-day happiness. And I have to be with these people like 8-9 hours a day, 5 days a week. Like I need to enjoy them to be sane. And then this company, or do I need to have that movement elsewhere? And that's kind of how I think about that evaluation. And then sometimes you might just get an opportunity that wasn't even on your radar when you were happy, and that's an opportunity you don't want to let go. So sometimes things can actually be going pretty well, but you just get another opportunity that seems like you need to take it. So that's kind of another wild card that can happen.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's totally, I've experienced the same thing as well. When I got the offer from Google X, even though I have like competing offers, I feel like it was an opportunity that I could not let go. So yeah, totally makes sense. And so I'm not sure if you can touch on this, but like what kind of things do you do as a PM at Tesla, or how do you spend your time as a PM in general?
Yeah, so at Tesla, I'm on the digital software team for the energy group. So I manage a couple of parts of the software suite, one of which is the customer facing account. So just like if you order something and you have an account to track its shipping, when you order solar, there's like an account to track all of the steps that you need to go through to actually get the system installed and turned on. And so I own that experience for the solar roof product. And the solar roof are the roof tiles that produce solar as opposed to solar panels on top of the roof. And then I also manage a suite of internal tools that are used for scheduling. So anytime a technician needs to go to a customer's home, that event is scheduled in a scheduling tool that I manage the team that manages those tools as well. So that's what I do there. And then the second part of the question was, I'm blanking on the second part of the question. Oh, how do I spend my time? Yeah, I think it can definitely range every day, as I'm sure any PM might say. But generally, I guess I would say maybe like, okay, so the core parts of my job are one, there's a lot of stakeholder interaction, both on the internal tool side of the role, but also in the customer facing side of the role, as because it's the fulfillment process, there are a lot of interactions that work with the internal business users as well. So a lot of conversations that are basically focused on tracking how things are going, finding opportunities for improvement, finding pain points and gaps, and kind of synthesizing potential areas to make improvements next. Then there is time spent with like engineering management. So thinking about high level projects, well, I guess actually before that, I'll talk about time with design. Anytime there's a new initiative that we need to create that has some type of user interface, there is interaction with the designer to say, this is the problem we're looking to solve. Let's mock up some options of what this could look like, and then continue to iterate on those, shop them internally, potentially do user testing, and until we're at a place where we're ready for this to be the design we implement. So that's probably like, I would say 15%, maybe 10% of the time. Then there's time with like engineering management or engineering leads to think through the strategy of how to implement an initiative. So anything from a small feature to a very large update. There's a check-in with engineers to say, what are the core components we need to break this into? How do we break this down into actual requirements? What's the order in which those should be executed? And are there any risks we need to be thinking about? Are there any things we need to do before we can start this work? And making sure all of those are documented. Then I spend, every day I have stand up with both of my engineering teams. And then once a week we have a scoping session, and once a week we also have a sprint planning for both teams. So yeah, in stand up it's often just constant interaction with engineers, checking in on what happened yesterday, what's going to happen today, and any blockers that are arising. And if for any reason there's a change in priorities or a reason we need to adjust things that the different engineers are working on, that would be talked about in those forums. And then in the scoping sessions, it's taking those requirements that I worked on with the engineering leads and talking through them with the actual developers that will be doing them, getting any added input, and then estimating how much effort those them estimating how much effort those requirements will take. So yeah, working directly with engineers. Oh, and then once the implementation starts, there's often things that come up where an engineer might need to reach out to say, hey, you know, this unexpected thing came up, how should we handle it? Is it really important? It looks exactly like this, or can it look like that? Those kinds of things. So yeah, interaction, like direct interaction with engineers is another piece. And then there's always a component of kind of working with my leadership, but also leadership on in other parts of the business I might work with to keep folks up to date on what is happening, share new updates, share vision and where we're going, and kind of ground folks in the data of how we're seeing the things that we've done play out. And that's like another chunk of time there. So yeah, it can be very varied. Oh, and I should say the rest of my time is spent kind of in individual work, thinking through prioritization, thinking through the core components of what a project needs to contain, organizing how I work with folks, or organizing milestones for projects, that sort of thing that can be done on your own to set you up for success in all of those interactions with those other people. So so yeah, it can definitely be varied, and it's very spread out. I think that's something that's common to all product management roles, is you have to work with a lot of different parts of the business in order to make the product work and work well. So so yeah, that's kind of a breakdown of some of the ways I spend my time.
Yeah, that is definitely a lot of different components, and you're also like highly integrated into the engineering, design, and all the stakeholder meetings. So I'm curious, as you come from a non-technical background, and the product you're working on also has a hardware component. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, I think challenges are, I think honestly in my current role, the most of the challenge comes around priority, just because there are so many things that can be done, so many things to do, so many things that can improve the business and the experience. So keeping a great pulse on just keeping connected with all of the folks who are working on various aspects of the business, and constantly making sure that prioritization of the things that my team is working on serve those overall goals and are serving those as best as possibly can. And sorry if you all hear background noise, I'm like right by a lot of construction outside right now. But yeah, so interestingly enough, like you know, I while we are selling products that are hardware, actually don't interact with the hardware side of the business very much. And then the software side, you know, of all of the things that are a challenge, the technology hasn't been the challenge, at least for me personally. So, so yeah, I would say a lot of it is really just around like, you know, I've been growing as a leader to prioritize better, but also like communicate that priority really strongly. So if things need to adjust, the right folks know about it, and we talk about it and adjust. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Seems like prioritization is always the hardest part of PM, deciding on the right things to do. So makes total sense.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And there's a number of people here who come from non-technical backgrounds, and even some people asked in the registration form, you know, if you'd have any advice for PMs trying to break into climate as a PM, especially for those who are not coming from a technical background, such as yourself.
Yeah, I think just one piece of advice from my personal experience are like, if there is an organization with a like a rotational program or like an APM program, I really do think those are great entry points for product. And it's usually like larger, more well-resourced companies that have this type of thing, which don't always coincide with like climate work, which is a bit of a challenge. So like, for example, for me, I started at IBM, which is a ginormous company, like the size of some countries. And you know, they have the resources to have these programs and all of the educational resources you can imagine around what product management should look like and all of the cycles of it, et cetera. And so, you know, I don't think that I could have made I don't know of a place I could have come into the climate space as a PM, at least at the same, yeah, at least in the same way as without having that original experience. So that is one route, but I know that that's not like, you know, if you're looking to start your career in climate, that might not be the most attractive route. And maybe there are some companies in the climate space or nonprofits in the climate space that have these types of programs. I'm not sure, but I haven't personally seen them. So yeah, thinking of other potential ways, you know, I do think most product roles. Okay, so I think another way is just to look for APM or associate product manager roles in general. Even if there's not like a program designed around it, they're more likely to be open to folks who have no product experience for sure. But I also know there are folks who are a little bit more senior, and an APM role might not be the best fit, but you still are trying to find a way to transition into product. You know, some of there are some resources out there like product school, et cetera, that can teach you just the basic ways that product managers think about like understanding users and user personas and coming up with a hypothesis and testing that hypothesis, and some of those just like vernacular and like ways of thinking that you would probably need to know in product interviews pretty well. There are also some very affordable resources that or just like video learning, that sort of thing, that I've even used because product is so different at every company. Every time I'm thinking about another company, I have to kind of go back to the basics to remember like the way I do product is not the way everyone does product. So I need to like refresh on the way some other companies think about product as well. But yeah, so that's another method. I think, of course, if there is a place where you do have an area of expertise right now, if you're willing to join a company in a role that's more in line with that, learn the company and then switch into a product role potentially. That's another route I've seen a lot of folks take. And so, you know, one piece of advice I was given, and of course, you know, there are people that have defied this, so do what works for you. But one piece of advice that I was given once was like, just make one shift at a time. So if you're shifting industry, keep the same like role or like type of work. If you're switching your role, stay in the same company or stay in the same industry. And making moves, one of those moves at a time is a lot easier. So let's say you're in a company doing work that you're currently have expertise in, but then you're able to switch into product. Now that sets you up to, after you've done this, you can do product other places. Because unfortunately for most product roles, there is like a barrier that you know, should have already done product. So like, how do you get that first product experience is a challenge for sure. But yeah, so those are some of the ways I could think of, like any rotational program or APM program, using some of the educational resources out there to kind of build the product thinking and product skills prior to applying to product roles is another method. And then also moving within a company. So starting in one role, but then moving into product within that company where you already understand the company, you already understand the products and the customers, et cetera. So now all you have to learn is the product management role. And that's usually more feasible than learning all of those things at the same time. Yeah.
Flipping sort of like the lens a bit, rather than focusing on the early stages, how about right now? You know, you're currently a Cleantech product manager at Tesla, and like you're working in a space that has a lot of value to society, or at least the effect of the work that you do in the end how do you measure like your personal impact as a PM in climate now?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is something that evolves for me over time. You know, the more that I learn, and the more that, yeah, more experience that I have. But I've kind of thinking about how I've thought about impact in my career. For whatever reason, I'm particularly driven by reaching a lot of people, or having like a lot of implementations, and for whatever reason, the number of people reached by the work that I do seems to be the major motivator for me in terms of impact. So I definitely think about like number of people or geographies, or in the case of solar, it's like kilowatts and megawatts, like that my work or my company or whatever the case may be has deployed or reached. That's kind of the major way that I think about impact. And I'm sure that's different for every person, but it seems to be the thing that's most motivating to me. So like in the case of solar, you know, one thing about Tesla is that there's also like a commercial solar component. The company in general just has a lot of reach and influence in the industry broadly. So that's something that I think about in terms of impact, being part of Tesla. But yeah, and even every role that I've done, just thinking about the impact in terms of like how many people, or how many, in the case of residential solars, homes are we actually transitioning from using fossil fuels to using clean energy. So yeah, I think that's like the main way for me right now, and I'm sure that will evolve as I grow in my career.
Awesome. That sounds super fantastic. So now we'll move on to some audience Q&A. We had a lot of questions in the chat. So I think we'll just first, I think Richard and Shelley has a similar question about the culture at Tesla. Could you talk about how would you describe the culture at Tesla, and what are some interactions between PMs and Eng?
Yeah, so just to caveat, you know, I won't speak too specifically to things at Tesla, just for like PR work reasons. But I think interactions between PM and Eng I can speak to. So yeah, at least in my interactions, and this is across Tesla, IBM, have been very much like it's like a strategic partnership, right? Like very much based on respect and acknowledgement of the engineering team's area of expertise, but also the product team's role. So one thing I think about as a PM interacting with engineers is I need to come to the table with my due diligence done. So the last thing I want to do is spend engineers' time thinking about things before their requirements or before the overall objective is really clear. And there might be instances where you do that intentionally to kind of get feedback on like, is this even an interesting route to think about? But at the time where you're actually starting to move into the work, that due diligence should be done. And you should really be coming to the engineering team with the what really well defined, so you can purely focus on the how with engineering. So yeah, I think those interactions are really great, and probably one of the more rewarding and fun parts of the job, because you get to turn, you know, this what into a real thing, and work through how you actually get there. So yeah, I think that's how I would respond to that one.
Amazing. And I know we have also another question from Anurup, but since he's here, would you like to unmute yourself and ask Alexis your question?
Yeah, why not? Thank you for giving me the option. I actually wanted to understand what prioritization framework you use or would have come across, because I've seen some complexity versus business value models. The, so I just wanted to understand which format do you follow, a specific format you follow.
So just to summarize, he's asking about like what are some prioritization frameworks that you use?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think at the highest level, I feel like this is a big cheating answer, but at the highest level, it really is just effort versus impact. But parts of that impact are like, who is this problem or opportunity? Who does it apply to? How many of those people or customers or users does it apply to? How severe is this pain point for them, or how big could this opportunity improve their experience, or how much could this opportunity improve their experience? So the combination of those two things kind of help me suss out overall impact. And then is solving this particular pain point going to move us towards a priority goal for the business? So it might, make things a lot better for the people that it affects, but it's not going to move us towards any of the top priority goals. So that's going to put its impact down a little bit. And then on the effort side, it's like, is this feasible, period? Like, is this even something we can do based on our skill set without having to potentially bring in some type of external skill set? If so, like how much effort will it take? And that's where engineering team can come in to help estimate the amount of work that would be required for different updates. And then one kind of like asterisk I put on that is like, is there something time sensitive about this one? So there might be an update that on paper is a little bit lower impact than something else, but it's lower effort, and there's actually a reason we need this thing done at a certain time. Whereas the other one, we want to do it as soon as possible, but there's nothing making that time sensitive. So in that case, we might actually prioritize the number 2 ahead of the number 1, or maybe that's not, maybe it's the number 5 ahead of the number 4. Because one is time sensitive and the other is not. So that's kind of like how I think about prioritization. And then there's a little bit of art to it as well. If there's a particular area of the business where, let's say you're in a business-to-business company and there's one customer that is a pretty big customer, and they are really need something, and let's say that they've been let down recently and we need to kind of work on that relationship. You might prioritize something for them a little higher than you normally would for the sake of the overall success of the business. So and again, apologies for the background noise here. But yeah, that's how I think about prioritization.
Okay, that makes total sense. Nice. Yeah, I think that's most of the audience questions for now. I think next up, we would like to move into a networking session. Alexis, do you mind muting? Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. So I think for those who would like to enter a networking session and then chat with others, meet with our participant, feel free to stay on the call, and then we can